Hey listeners, this is Peter, and welcome back to the History Shorts podcast, brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world, including this one, and all in one place. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts, a brilliant young woman from Brooklyn, an affair that mixed love, lies, and espionage, and a courtroom drama that nearly brought down the FBI. This is the story of Judith Coplon, a spy who seduced America.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The story begins not in Moscow, but in Brooklyn, New York, during the turbulence of the 1930s. Judith Coplon was born in 1913 to a middle-class Jewish family, smart, ambitious, and deeply political. As a student at Barnard College, she was drawn to social causes, progressive politics, and the idealism that captivated many young Americans during the Great Depression. She excelled academically, graduating with honors, and then found work in Washington, D.C. in the early 1940s, a city that was booming with wartime energy and opportunities. Her job at the U.S. Department of Justice in the Foreign Agents Registration section placed her in the heart of America's national security machinery. Her role was to analyze information about individuals and organizations suspected of working for foreign powers. In short, Judith Coplon had access to sensitive memos, to internal FBI reports, and to classified intelligence. But she also had something else, curiosity, and soon that curiosity would take her into dark places. The 1940s were years of paradox. The US and Soviet Union had been wartime allies, united against Nazi Germany, but as the Cold War dawned, those same allies turned into enemies. Inside America, the Communist Party still drew idealistic intellectuals, men and women who saw socialism as the path to equality, anti-fascism, and world peace. Judith, idealistic and disillusioned with capitalism's inequalities, sympathized with the leftist causes. She attended discussion groups, socialized with politically active friends, and gradually attracted the attention of Soviet intelligence. In 1944, she had reportedly came into contact with an operative of the NKGB, the Soviet security agency that would later become the KGB. The Soviets didn't recruit her with money. They appealed to her idealism, her belief that both nations needed to share information to prevent another war. Again, this was 1944, when World War II was still going on. And so, she began her transformation, from an analyst in Washington to an unwitting spy for Moscow. Her handler, according to later FBI accounts, was a charming, mysterious man named Valentin Gubichev, a Soviet employed at the United Nations. Gubichev worked in the UN's Secretariat, but he was also an intelligence officer as well. The two met secretly, sometimes in crowded restaurants, sometimes in parked cars on DC side streets. They exchanged not only documents, but also affection. What began as espionage evolved into romance, or perhaps the illusion of one. To her, he was an idealist who shared her worldview. To him, she was a source, one who could open a window into the American Justice Department's inner workings. By the late 1940s, Coplon was regularly passing along sensitive FBI reports, including internal surveillance documents about suspected Soviet agents. It was an extraordinary breach. She was essentially feeding Moscow information about how the United States was tracking Moscow. For the FBI, it was the perfect storm and the perfect trap. By 1948, the FBI had intercepted secret Soviet cables. part of what would later be known as the Venona Project, a top-secret cryptanalysis program that deciphered Soviet intelligence messages. These messages pointed to an unidentified female spy inside the Department of Justice, someone who fit Coplon's profile. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover personally took interest. He saw in Coplon's case an opportunity to expose communist espionage and to prove that domestic surveillance worked. Agents began tailing her around the clock. They watched her meet with Gorbachev in hotel lobbies, on park benches, and near phone booths. They noted the briefcases, the envelopes, and the coded language. Then, on the night of March 4th, 1949, the trap was sprung. In New York City, FBI agents followed Coplon as she drove to a meeting place with Gorbachev. They arrested both on the spot. Inside her purse, they found classified documents. FBI memoranda stamped secret, detailing counterintelligence operations and suspected Soviet contacts. To Hoover, it was a triumph. He'd caught a spy red-handed. But he also had a problem. How the FBI had caught her was legally explosive. Judith Coplon's arrest made national headlines. She was young, attractive, and articulate, the very image of post-war American womanhood. The tabloids called her the glamorous spy. The New York Times described her as a young lady with the face of innocence and the heart of a traitor. But when her case went to trial, the government's case began to unravel. Her defense attorneys, among them the legendary lawyer Archibald Palmer, argued that FBI surveillance had been illegal in the first place, because to identify her, the Bureau had relied on Venona descripts, classified Soviet cable translations that were so secret that the government refused to acknowledge their existence in court. Without those intercepts, there was no clear proof on how the FBI began tailing her, which meant that the evidence gathered could be ruled inadmissible. In other words, the FBI would not share how they knew that she was a spy in the first place. Even more damaging, the FBI had shadowed her without a warrant, bugged her phone, and possibly tampered with her briefcase. In the end, her defense argued, the Bureau had violated her constitutional rights. The courtroom turned into a media circus. Coplon denied everything, insisting that she was being persecuted for her politics. She described her relationship with Gorbachev as romantic and not treason. When she took the stand, she was poised, calm, and even sympathetic. The image of the femme fatale began to fracture, replaced by that of a woman trapped in the machinery of Cold War paranoia. In the first trial in Washington, D.C., she was convicted, but a later court overturned the verdict, citing FBI misconduct. A second trial in New York ended the same way, conviction followed by reversal. In the eyes of the public, she was guilty. In the eyes of the law, however, she walked free. The Coplon case wasn't just about one woman, though. It became a referendum of how far America was willing to go in the name of national security. The FBI had caught her through illegal means, and if her conviction had stood, it would have legitimized warrantless surveillance. Instead, the courts drew a line. Even spies, they said, have constitutional rights, for better or for worse. It was one of the earliest clashes between privacy, security, and civil liberties, a battle that still echoes today in debates over wiretapping, government surveillance, and national security leaks. For J. Edgar Hoover, the case was a humiliation. He'd paraded Coplon as proof of communist infiltration, yet his own tactics had undermined the prosecution. For the Justice Department, it exposed how blurred the line between vigilance and overreach could become. And for the American public, it symbolized something else entirely, a new kind of fear. If someone like Judith Coplon, educated, respectable, patriotic, could be a spy, then who couldn't? After her legal battles ended, Coplon faded from the spotlight. She married, had children, and lived quietly under her married name, Judith Rosenberg. For decades, she refused interviews, avoided publicity, and never admitted guilt. She died in 2011 at the age of 89. Her secrets, if she still had any to tell, buried with her. Historians still debate her true role, though. Some argue that she was a minor courier in a much larger Soviet network. Others believe the FBI inflated her case to justify its expanding powers in the early Cold War. The Venona project, released decades later, confirmed that the Soviets had indeed placed a mole inside the Justice Department. Almost certainly, that mole was Coplon. But by that time those documents became public, her name had long been forgotten by most Americans. Hopefully, today's episode has inspired you to seek out and learn more about this subject. For answers to questions, sources for today's episode, to leave a comment, or check out upcoming guest announcements, visit www.historyshortspodcast.com or look for History Shorts Podcast on Facebook, X, or Patreon. Stay curious, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.